An hour before its dark review. It's finally here, the review of the latest opus from progressive rock band Marillion. But is this going to be a masterpiece like Fear or Marbles? Keep on watching to find out. Welcome back to Rocker's Beer Review. Now, before I start this review of the latest Marillion album, I just want to let you know that if you're a big fan of Marillion, then keep on watching, because this week I'm going to be releasing my exclusive interview with Matt DeBono, who's not only a personal friend of mine, but also a guitarist with the rock band King Rat. Now, Matt, in the interview, tells me what it was like to support Marillion back in 2007, with insights not only of the gig itself, but the backstage with the band and the reaction from the fans on the evening. And also we also discussed some of his time when he was playing with other sort of famous acts, including Fish, where he played at the backstage party for the Hobble on the Cobbles festival. So you don't want to miss this. If you are not a subscriber, then please consider subscribing, hitting the subscribe button, hitting the notification bell, and then when I release the video, it's going to be in 2 parts. Then you'll be notified as soon as it comes out, and you'll be able to watch that and enjoy it. But I think it's something a little bit special and quite different for me on the channel, so I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so let's talk about the new Marillion album. So the release of a new Marillion album always gives a sense of anticipation. It's not as if you could call Marillion, prolific. They're not releasing albums every year or even every other year, certainly over the past 20 or so years. This album is the first, in fact, since 2016's masterpiece, Fear. Now, that album was dark and complex and multi-layered. And for a band who've been sort of, going for 40-odd years, it was incredible that that album, Fear, would go down as one of their best. So, would a follow-up, some 6 years in the making, ever be able to hold a flame, let alone surpass in quality to that Fear album? Well, excuse the pun, but fear no more, as An Hour Before It's Dark is somehow elevated itself to go down as a classic Marillion album. Not only a classic Marillion album, but one of the best progressive rock albums of the 21st century. It seems like when there's a lot going on in the world, Marillion can harness the thoughts of the nation to bring us a cutting edge and very relevant themed album. But whereas Fear was very, British almost, and introspective, An Hour Before It's Dark takes on a much more, global approach with an almost outwardly positive viewpoint on the world events, making the album much more dynamic and upbeat musically than they've ever been for a while, and I think that is a good thing. The 2 main themes on the album centre around the environment, global warming, etc., and also the recent C-19 pandemic. And although Steve Hogarth has gone on record saying that he didn't want to write about COVID, certainly living in the last couple of years, I think he's found that it was almost impossible to ignore, and some of those thoughts have slipped into his lyrics, and they make quite strong themes. And as I mentioned, musically, this album is much more upbeat, more, it moves along much quicker, much more than any previous sort of album. There's a much more driving bass and drum sort of sound, more energy. Certainly Steve Rothery seems more energised, and although he's still the master of that sort of melodic, very subtle, less is more playing style, some of his sort of lead breaks, there's almost an urgency at some time with them, and it's very much welcome. Mark Kelly, keyboard player, you know, he keeps everything in checks and creates this sort of overall sort of atmosphere to each song with sort of lush piano and sort of keyboard sort of soundscapes. Steve Hogarth, the singer, still proves that his voice shows no sign of deterioration or depreciation, with a great range from a sort of soft, almost sort of whisper, melodic whisper at times, to belting out, hitting his sort of full falsetto vocals as well. Praise must also go to Choir Noir, yeah, it's difficult to say that, that feature throughout the albums. And they give much more sort of colour and depth to some of the songs. And it's the first time of them being used, and I think hopefully we'll get them on subsequent releases. So let's talk about the songs. There are only 6 real songs on the album. There's a 7th track, but it's a very short instrumental and almost an intro to the song. As before, 4 of these 6 songs are split into different parts. Now, I do sometimes wonder, you know, why they have done this. You know, in a world of streaming, it does sort of mean you need to listen to the whole album, listen to it as a whole, to really be able to listen to really appreciate it, and for it to make sense. You know, for me, well, I'm a child of the 80s, and you know, big into sort of my mixtapes, and I like listening to a lot of different tracks from different albums, different artists on playlists, and so you can't really do that very well. You can't mix and match songs from here, because you know you've got 3, 4 and 5 part songs, so having one of those songs individually doesn't really sort of work out as well. It's difficult for those songs to sort of sit on there, them parts of songs to sit on their own. Most of the times, you know, as well, that there's the parts of the songs they cut really quickly. So this is why I feel that why the song needs to be split up, because sometimes you don't even know where the split, when you're listening to it, you don't really know where the split happens. Anyway, that's the only sort of bugbear I really have. So let's hit it with the opening track. Well, the opening track is the one we've all heard before, and if you're lucky like me, you probably would have seen it played live on their recent tour. This song, Be Hard on Yourself, it's an upbeat, rocky, 3-part song, totals around 9 minutes, but because of the energy and the excitement of all 3 parts, it just flies by and almost like feels like half the time. You know, and although I've played it lots and lots of times, more times than I can even track, I still think it's a really good song, and I think it's still a strong song from the album. The track's subject matter, as I have discussed before in previous videos, is about the environment, how we need to be hard on ourselves, we need to make changes to our lives and act now. This song references the album title as well, obviously, with Hogarth using the sort of metaphor really, that we have an hour before it's dark. Obviously that can also that's come from really a little bit from when he was young and you'd go out and play and your mum would say, come home, you've got an hour before it's dark, that's when you've got to come home. But it's also, as I say, a metaphor more about, you know, we've only got an hour before it's too late to save the environment. So track 2 is a new track that we haven't heard before, and it's a 3-part reprogram the G. It develops a little bit on this sort of environmental issues, but brings it more about our own mortality and how whether there's a way that we can deal with this problem, whether there's a solution, whether COVID even has created a solution. It's a decent rock song, this, but probably, you know, at the moment it's probably the weakest track on the album. There's no real sort of memorable hooks. I think more and more I listen to it, I will get some of those hooks and it will become a better, but apart from that, it's not very instant. Then we get a short instrumental track, Only a Kiss. As I said, it's not really a song, it's just an intro to the next song, which is Murder Machines, the second song that they released. This is probably the most immediate track, mainly because it's about 4 minutes long. It's very catchy, it's upbeat, even if the subject matter, which is like definitely front and centre about COVID, isn't. Track 5 is probably, at this point in time, my favourite track on the album. It's called The Crow and the Nightingale, and it's although it's a little bit of a throwaway track lyrically, this is Steve Hogarth's sort of ode to Leonard Cohen. It's probably, out of all the tracks, the most atmospheric and sort of laid back compared with other songs on the album. There's a big use here of the choir noir on this song, with lots of sort of choral sort of backing vocals throughout. But the highlight, really for me, comes around the 4-minute mark, with an extended, nearly minute-long Steve Rothery super solo, which, you know, to be honest, is probably the best solo I've heard from him since, I don't know, maybe The Great Escape from the Brave album. It really elevates the song to a classic status, and I can't wait to hear that song played live. The penultimate song is split into 5 parts and is called Sierra Leone. It's a sort of a storytelling sort of song, really. It's about a man who finds a giant diamond as he's scrapping around in the sort of dust, but decides, although he's living in poverty, he will not sell it. And it took a few spins for me to get this song. It's as I say, it's a real sort of story being told here. Musically, though, it sort of reminded me a little bit of the sky above the rain from Sounds That Can't Be Made, and in fact, that's probably one of my favourite songs off that album. So that's, you know, that should show you that this is a very good song. I think it's like Reprogram the Gene. It's a song that's probably doesn't gonna hit immediately, but the more I listen to it, the better I think it becomes, and I think it will slowly become another fan favourite. But finishing the album. Yeah, I can't believe we're here already. Finishing the album is the song Care. Now, this is a 4-part song and is also the longest on the album, clocking in at some 15 odd minutes. There's been a lot of talk about this track before the launch of the album, with the anticipation that it was not only the best song on the album, but also one of the best songs Marillion has ever written. This is, you know, this gives you a lot of anticipation, and you think, is it going to be as good? Well, let's cut to the chase. It is a very good song. The first part in itself, it's about 4 minutes, and it's called Maintenance Drugs, and it's an incredible part track. I mean, it could almost be a standalone song. It's that good. It starts with a funky sort of bass line. Reminds me a little bit of some of the songs from Arachnophobia. But the real money shot comes with a massive big guitar refrain, and still Steve Hogarth singing An Hour Before It's Dark in his sort of trademark falsetto voice. It's a real big emotional moment, both musically and also lyrically. And just when it builds and builds with another sort of stunning solo at the end, it sort of, you know, transitions into part 2 almost seamlessly. Part 2 is a little bit slower, a little bit more, brings it back into a bit more atmospheric piece, and then we're hitting it. Before you know it, you're into part 3. This for me hits the real sort of emotional zenith with a stirring sort of lyric about death and the final moments, really. But overall, the whole 4-part sort of song talks about the pandemic, specifically about the wonderful work of the NHS and how important and heroic the doctors and nurses that cared for people that were suffering from COVID and obviously to some part dying. This part has a real sort of haunting solo that really sort of creates this sort of atmosphere as well. It's another highlight for Steve Rothery. The last part of the song, though, is something really uplifting and culminates in hitting home about the fact that the angels of the world are not on the walls of churches. That's the lyric. But it's the COVID doctors and nurses who cared for people. When we were sleeping, they were caring for people throughout the night, throughout the whole pandemic. And it's a real sort of celebration of them, and almost a celebration of the fact that they really helped and really were the sort of heroes of the pandemic. It's not only a great fitting end of the song, but it's also obviously a great fitting end to the album as a whole. I think the song here is a masterpiece in the same way as, you know, songs like Neverland are lauded from the Marbles album. So that's the album. is one of Marillion's finest. But where recent albums from them, certainly Fear, have been much more sort of slower burns, you know, took lots and lots of listens to really truly appreciate, to get those little melodies into your head. This album is a lot more immediate. So, you know, the first time I listened to it, I thought, yeah, this is great. I love these songs. So I hope that I'm still loving it in a year's time. Let's hope, though, you know, that the next album doesn't take another 6 years to come out, and hopefully it'll be out much sooner. So I hope you enjoyed this review for An Hour Before It Starts by Marillion. What do you think of the album? Is it up there with their best? What's your favourite track? For me, as I said, The Crow and the Nightingale and Care are probably my two favourite songs on this album. It's a cracking album, and if you haven't listened to it, then please go and listen to it right now. The songs are all available on YouTube. You can get it on Spotify or other streaming as well, so there's no excuse not to listen to it. So, hope you've enjoyed this video. As I said, please subscribe so you'll get notified of this two-part interview that I'm going to be doing with Matt DeBono this week. And until the next one, you know what you're going to do. Keep on rocking.